There's something online that is strikingly genius that needs to be addressed because I don't think that anyone else, especially on radio, has really talked about it in a deep manner, the way that it deserves to be talked about. That thing is surveillance cameraman. Now, surveillance cameraman is a man. He's a guy who films people on the street and sometimes inside buildings as well, but mostly on the street is where you will find surveillance cameraman if you happen to come across him. Now, I'm not sure as to his exact location. I've heard people say that he's in Maryland. I've heard people say that he's in the Baltimore area, and I've also heard people say that he was at one time in Seattle. So his location varies, although Maryland seems to be his regular stomping grounds. Now, what is surveillance cameraman? Perhaps is a question that needs to be answered. Well, it's kind of complicated and kind of simple at the same time. And that's where it starts to get really genius. So surveillance cameraman in its purest form is just a guy who films people on the street, and that's it. Really, the video is not about him. The video is about the reaction of people to being filmed. The video isn't really him being funny. The video is not really him doing anything other than just filming somebody. Now, he'll say things, but he's not funny, if that makes any sense at all. I mean, it's funny in the context of it, but the lines he says in and of themselves are not jokes. Like the different things that he says are not jokes in and of themselves. It's just in the context of them, they're kind of funny. Where he'll walk up to somebody and film them, and that's it. You know, he just holds up his camera and films somebody outside of a store or something, and they'll stop and they'll get mad, and then they'll start yelling at him. And sometimes they don't care. Probably a lot of people walk by, and that doesn't make it into the video. But a lot of the time, too, what you catch on the video is people just getting very upset. And they'll ask him why he's filming, and he'll say he's just taking a video. And he has this really calm, laid-back voice. It sounds like he just woke up, and you're sort of disturbing him in his filming of you. And they'll say, why are you taking a video of me? And he says, why not? And he'll say, hey, don't take a video of me. He says, oh, it's okay. I'm just taking a video. And my favorite line of his is where he says, you seem confused. Now, this sounds like this guy is just the biggest jerk on the planet, doesn't it? Well, kind of, and also not really. Now, you have to understand some legalese, I guess, in order to understand why this is funny. And some social experimentation or social analysis is in mind, or is appropriate as well, to help to understand why this is so funny. Now, again, all he does is film people, and that's it. He's not really doing anything other than filming somebody. He's not committing any sort of act of violence. He's really doing nothing other than holding up a camera that happens to also be on record. And GeekWire wrote a really good piece about this by Todd Bishop. Creepy cameraman pushes the limits of public surveillance, a glimpse of the future. And that's where things start to get really interesting. People have come to accept, says GeekWire, surveillance cameras as part of everyday life. But what happens when someone is carrying the surveillance camera instead? So instead of it being mounted on a wall, this surveillance camera, what if it was a person holding it, following you around? That's the question that's been raised by a series of online videos in which an unidentified man takes a camera around Seattle and other parts of Washington state, walking up to people and recording them for no apparent reason other than to make a point. So how is what he's doing different than those stationary surveillance cameras tucked away in buildings and public places? That's where the question starts to become interesting, because really what he's doing is exactly the same thing as these surveillance cameras that are mounted on walls everywhere. The only difference is that he's there. You can see him, and he makes himself apparent, although not necessarily intentionally, just by merit of him being a person and existing. He makes himself apparent. It's an amazing social experimentation, because it's just so genius that I wouldn't have thought to do that. Who would think to do a social commentary in that way? It's just so interesting. So he's been called the creepy cameraman, and pretty good reason. It's clearly more than a little unsettling for the subject of his surveillance. You can see the angry reactions in his videos, and it's not clear who the person is, this surveillance cameraman, or what type of camera he's using. But technology author and blogger Brian S. Hall makes the point that this could be a preview of our future, with technology such as Google's Project Glass making cameras and recording devices even more pervasive in our daily lives. So what then should we make of it? Well, in some of his videos, he points out actually that he can film in public areas. He'll sort of, in a sideways sort of way, say that, where he's like, well, I'm in public, or something along those lines. So he does make it clear that he knows what he's doing. with these recordings. He knows that he can film if he's in public. And it starts to get kind of fascinating when you dig into it on a philosophical level, because it's really, there's no difference between what he's doing and what surveillance cameras do every single day, 24/7. I'm in front of a camera right now. Now, I'm in front of a camera voluntarily. I mean, I set up the recording and everything for YouTube, so an argument could be made that there's a bit more good faith involved in the camera that I'm in front of right now. You'd be right about that, I suppose. But when you go into a business, you're going into someone's property, right? And somebody can film within their own property, and that's fine. You can also film within a public area because you've no reasonable expectation of privacy in a public area. So, as an example, if you're walking down a public sidewalk and I want to film, I can film even if you're in frame. Now, you can ask to not be in frame, and I'll voluntarily take you out. But aside from that, there's really not much that can be done. So it's interesting to note that he's really doing just that. He is only filming. He's doing nothing different from that. He is simply filming. And sometimes he'll walk, and that's the extent of it. And sometimes he'll run away when people try to beat him up or grab his camera. But it points out how we get angry at surveillance when it's there, when it's apparent, when it's readily available for us to see, when it's just right there, it's in our faces. We're very much opposed to it. But when it's innocuous, when it's in the background, we don't really care. And that's an interesting social commentary, because it's out of sight, out of mind is so pervasive in our culture today, where we have that mindset of, well, if I can't see it, then I don't really care. It's kind of like war, where there's not been a war that's affected us in the homeland for a long, long time. And so we're very much war hawkish in a lot of ways when it comes to bombing of other people. We'll readily jump on the bandwagon of bombing of other people, because here in the United States, we really haven't had to bomb people, or we have not ever been bombed really in recent years that we can think of. We've never experienced the horror of having the city capitol blow up from a cruise missile that's been launched off the shore. We've never had to experience that. So because we don't know the true horror that's involved in military conflict, we're very much fine with launching military conflict against another populace, simply because we see them as being less civilized than us, or we see them as being a threat to national security. Yes, even the women and children. So it's a social commentary on that idea, and it's a social commentary on just the out of sight, out of mind idea in general. It goes far deeper than just filming people. It's out of sight, out of mind, and we're fine with that. But if it's in our faces, then we start to get upset. And this argument can be made for drones as well, where drone photography is, of course, becoming more and more popular. You can fly a drone around in a public right-of-way and film with no problem. And you can fly a drone around on your own property and film with no problem. However, if you fly a drone around on somebody else's property, that's where things start to become a little bit different, because if you own property, that property is yours. Really, no one can tell you what to do on your own property unless it's somehow affected somebody else. And that's how it should be. Your property is your castle, not just your home, but extending past that, it's your castle. And so you can do whatever the heck you want to do, so long as it doesn't harm anyone else. And you can do that, and that's fine. That's non-aggression. You can do whatever you want, so long as it's not aggressive to somebody else, and that's about it. I mean, hey, why not, really? So if you want to grow plants on your own property, no one can tell you not to, because you're not harming anyone. If you want to start an oil refinery on your own property, so long as no fumes and noxious gases escape your property, you can do that. Now, if they do, somebody can sue you for damages to their property, their life, their limbs, their well-being, their day-to-day commerce, whatever. But that's about it. You can do whatever you want on your property, so long as you don't harm anyone else. And the public right-of-way is kind of the same way, where you can do whatever you want so long as you don't harm anyone else. And that includes filming people as well. You can film anyone. A common causeway is public property in the sense that it is everyone's property. A public property, in the true sense of the word anyway, is property which belongs to, well, everyone. So in a public park, you can pretty much do whatever you want so long as you're not harming anyone else. You can practice guitar, you can practice martial arts, yoga, what have you. You can you can pretty much do whatever you want so long as you're not causing harm to another person when you're outside. Now, there's always going to be the arguments of, well, I don't want such and such, or you wouldn't want this or that to have. You wouldn't want someone to be smoking right in front of you and all that sort of thing. Well, yeah, but I can always move, or I can ask them to please knock it off because my kids are here, or whatever. There are a lot of different options that don't involve illegalization of something, making something illegal. There are a lot of different options. So how would we react? Imagine you're walking down the street and somebody pulls out a camera and starts filming you, sort of walking backwards in front of you while you're walking down the street, and they're sort of getting a tracking shot of you walking, and they're walking backwards and you're walking forwards, and they have the camera pointed at you while you're walking. How would you react to that? Well, I really wouldn't care. I would say, hey, is this for the news or something? And beyond that, I really wouldn't care, because I know legally there's not really anything that can be done about it. And also, I just don't care because it doesn't really matter to me. If I'm going to be used in stock footage, hey, cool. If not, then hey, cool. It really doesn't matter to me. But how would you react to that? Would you try to smack the camera out of the guy's hand? Would you get mad? Would you get upset? Would you yell at him? Would you use profanities? Would you take the Lord's name in vain in order to shout him down? What would you do? What would your reaction be? Well, mine would be very laid back, because I'm very laid back. I really don't care about a whole lot, I guess. I mean, I do. It depends on your definition of caring, I suppose. I care as in I empathize with a lot, and I care as in I hold things of to great value. But when it comes to being upset about things, I'm really not upset very often. It takes a lot to make me annoyed at really anyone. So it's or especially to get angry. So I'll get annoyed a lot, but I don't really get mad or angry at anyone. So it really wouldn't be a big deal to me. I'm walking down the street, somebody wants to film, hey, big deal. I might, if it's an off day, I might say, hey, would you mind not filming me today, or something along those lines. But if they say no, I'm taking a video, I'd be like, okay. It's not really a big deal to me, because they can do that. Now, I've asked politely to stop, and they said no, and okay, that's as far as it goes, because I can just keep walking, and if I'm uninteresting enough, they'll probably leave. If you ignore them, they'll go away, I suppose, is the way of thinking. But that's how I would react. So how would you react? Would you get upset and try to yell at him and say, you can't film, don't you know, I'll call the cops and all these sorts of things, and try to smack the camera out of the person's hand? Or would you yell at the person and threaten them? Or what would you do? Well, a lot of people like to take the getting angry route. They like to get very upset and yell at the person. And this is, of course, in an effort to get the person to go away, not realizing that they're making a fool of themselves on camera, which is actually kind of funny. And that's part of the joke of it, too, is that these videos are just really funny to watch. So as a rundown, this guy is a surveillance cameraman, and he films people in their day-to-day business, just doing things. Now, there's not a whole lot of videos. I think there's only 9 or so, and they're about 5 minutes long or less. They're not very long videos, but they're very just interesting to watch, because the reaction of people is so interesting. It's really like audio verite, which is the recording of people doing day-to-day stuff, and that's it. It's audio recordings of just background noise and people talking on the street and that sort of thing. Audio verite, it's very voyeuristic, and that's sort of how you feel when you're watching surveillance cameraman videos, is you feel almost voyeuristic in watching these people just do their day-to-day stuff. But then it raises another question, is why do we care when other people see us do things in public, but suddenly we care when it's being recorded? I mean, what difference does it make if it's on camera or not? What difference really does that make that there's a tape of this now somewhere, or there's a digital video file of this on somebody's computer now that they can do whatever they want with? I mean, really does it matter that much? Because if you make a scene, then you've made a scene for other people to watch and to laugh at. But if you're totally innocuous and you're totally really just uninteresting in your day-to-day business, then you're probably not going to end up in any video, except for maybe in the background of somebody breakdancing on the street or something like that. And that's cool too. Really, what do we care about our public image? I mean, why do we care about our public images so much that we get so upset at somebody taking a video of us, to the point where we're willing to ruin our public images in order to not ruin our public images? Seems kind of, well, contradictory, actually. So Surveillance Cameraman raises a lot of interesting points in his videos without ever having to say really much of anything. And that's really the genius of it right there, is that he does all these different things and raises all these interesting points without ever saying a word, or was saying less than 10 words per video sometimes. Because again, his phrases are just You seem confused. I'm just taking a video, and it's okay. I'm just taking a video, or I can stand here, or whatever. Very few words, 2 or 3 word sentences is really all that you will hear from surveillance cameraman. And in one video, 1 or 2 videos, he raises the point where somebody, one I remember specifically is this guy who's a bicyclist, I should say, walking out of what looks like, Whole Foods or Kroger or whatever, and same difference, right? Winn-Dixie, Kroger, Whole Foods, same thing. He's walking out of one of these stores, Walmart, Target, and he's walking out of one of these stores, and he's walking past surveillance cameraman who's filming him, of course, and you never really see surveillance cameraman, by the way, because you are the camera. I guess it's sort of, you're an avatar of the camera. And he walks past, and he sort of looks at the camera, and he slows down, and he stops, and he says, "You mind if I ask why you're taking a video?" And all this stuff, and he gets confrontational. He says, "Why are you taking a video of me? Why are you taking videos here?" And he says, surveillance cameraman then says, "Well, you just walked out of the store, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "There's cameras inside there, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." "Well, it's the same thing." And he gets annoyed, and he shoves the camera, and he gets on his bike, and he rides away and all this stuff. But what difference does it make whether there are cameras in there that you can't see, or now there's a camera outside that you can? It raises so many good points without ever really having to say much at all. And that's surveillance cameraman in a nutshell. I would highly recommend that you check out surveillance cameraman's videos on YouTube and LiveLeak and Dailymotion. Really, your best option is to search for surveillance cameraman on Google and just click on whatever the first result is, because chances are that's going to be the one that'll get you there. He's had his videos removed from YouTube a few times, probably because of privacy infringement or some sort of violation of YouTube's terms of services or whatever. It's YouTube's site to do what they want with. But really, it's not hard to find his videos online. They've been on LiveLeak for a little while. I think they've been on Dailymotion, but there's a compilation of like all 9 or 10 or 11 videos or whatever on YouTube that you can watch. That's surveillance cameraman. It's just a fascinating social experiment of surveillance cameraman. And yeah, it's fun too, and it's funny. It's both fun, funny. It's a good social experiment. There's just a lot to it. It's very deep in ways that you wouldn't expect. And I don't even mean that in a pretentious sort of, I'm sitting in the back of my coffee shop smoking a cigarette wearing a fedora while I'm listening to some guy's band who's made up of samples of orangutans while he's playing a detuned guitar. I don't mean that in that sort of deep way. I mean, it's just deep in the sense that there's a lot more to it than just what's on face value. It's just some guy filming people. There are a lot of different philosophical points that are raised without him ever having to say more than just a few sentences. And that's what makes it so genius. And that's surveillance cameraman. And it really is kind of genius in an odd sort of way. It's kind of genius. So check out his videos, surveillance cameraman. No, I'm not being paid by surveillance cameraman. He seems like he's a student of some sort, probably a photographer. So I don't really think that he has a whole lot of money to pay me with anyway. If he does, that's fine too. But his videos are surveillance cameraman on YouTube, or just Google search it because they've been taken down a few times. So definitely check that out. Very interesting. Well, on the topic of privacy as well, and by the way, this is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We are everywhere. Listen live, Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. And Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. It is a warm day today, to say the least. We've been expecting rain pretty much all day. I think we may have gotten a smattering of rain sometime earlier this morning. But as it is now, it's about 88 degrees here in the Chattanooga area. We're expecting it to get up to 89 in the next hour or so. Today, actually, we are above the high, which is 88 today, with a 30% chance of storms. Tonight, it's going to be mostly clear. Friday, 88 degrees and sunny, and Saturday, 92 degrees and sunny. So how would you react to walking down the Walnut Street Bridge and somebody pulls out a camera and follows you around with it? Not even necessarily following you, just sort of tracks you in the shot. Would you care? Would you get upset? Would you get mad? Would you smack the camera out of the guy's hand? I don't know how I would react other than just, I don't really care. That would be my reaction. Well, a Kentucky man reacted very strongly to a drone which happened to hover over his backyard. The way William Meredith, I should say, sees it, according to our Seneca, it's pretty clear cut. A drone was flying over his backyard that was well-defined invasion of privacy, analogous to a physical trespassing. So not knowing who owned this drone, the man in Kentucky took out his shotgun and fired 3 blasts of number 8 birdshot to take out the drone. He says it was just right there. That's what he told our Seneca, saying it was hovering. I would never have shot it if it was flying. When he came down with a video camera right over my back deck, that's not going to work, he says. I know they're neat little vehicles, but one of the uses shouldn't be flying into people's yards and videotaping. Now, of course, he makes the older gentleman's mistake of saying videotaping when it's actually taking a digital video file, but hey, everybody makes mistakes. Minutes later, a car full of 4 men that he didn't recognize pulled up looking for a fight, he claims. And so people were very upset that this drone was shot down, using foul language, accusing him of shooting down a drone. His church replied to the men while wearing a 10mm Glock holstered on his hip is, if you cross that sidewalk onto my property, there's going to be another shooting, according to some of these claims. So the men then backed down, retreated to their cars, and waited for the police to arrive. So how would you react to a drone flying over your backyard? Really, I would be more curious than anything because I'm not really a confrontational person. This is Digital Drive, and we're on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
You feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. An initial court appearance for the Ohio police officer accused of murdering a driver during a traffic stop. Fox Radio's Tanya J. Powers.
Judge Megan Shanahan set former University of Cincinnati officer Ray Tenzing's bond at $1 million, and that got a reaction.
This is a courtroom. You will conduct yourselves at all times.
Tenzing's attorney says his client didn't intend to kill Samuel DuBose. The Coast Guard is trying to track down the source of a mysterious miles-long oil slick off the Santa Barbara County shoreline. And as fire season rages in California, authorities in San Bernardino County taking aim at drone operators with a reward.
We have asked drone operators to keep their drones away from the fires. They have ignored us.
James Ramos, supervisor of San Bernardino County. Fox News, we report, you decide.
There are many things that make me annoyed, I guess. Angry is not the word that I would use because, again, I'm kind of a chill guy. I don't really... care wouldn't be the right word. It's not that I don't care. It's just that I don't see it as something that's worthy of getting upset, I suppose. You know, you'll say all day that, oh, you know, don't you get mad at this or that. But really, I don't really get mad at much of anything because I don't see any point in getting mad at a lot of things. People, doesn't that just make you mad? Not really. I mean, little things will make me mad. Silly things will make me mad. They're totally innocuous and totally not worth getting mad at. And then big issues, I'm just like, well, you know, stuff happens. My general assumption is if something has there's some odd occurrence going on, my first assumption is, well, it's probably something stupid as for the cause of it. So, for instance, if there was a drone flying over my house, I would say, well, it's probably something stupid. Because really, it's just usually the case. Accidents happen, silly things happen, glitches happen, and weird results occur. And it's probably just something stupid. That's my assumption with almost everything. You know, something weird happens in my house, and I'm like, it's probably just something stupid. You know, I don't see it as a big deal until it makes itself into a big deal. Something is not a big deal to me unless it forces itself to be one. So if I saw a drone flying over my backyard, I would probably think, well, there's probably some silly reason for this. And I wouldn't really think a whole lot about it, although I would monitor it, certainly, but I wouldn't shoot it down immediately. If a drone was flying over my backyard, I would think, well, maybe there was a problem with its navigation and now it's stuck there. Maybe the guy's phone glitched out that's controlling it and it just, you know, freaked out and now it can't... now it's stuck in this location, and so the guy told it to hover so that it wouldn't crash. And benefit of a doubt, and if he finds it, then I'll give it back to him and ask him to please not fly over my property, or at least ask permission before he does. And that would really be the end of it for me. I wouldn't shoot it. So the way William Meredith saw it, though, it was pretty clear cut. According to Ars Technica, there was a drone flying over his backyard, and it was a well-defined invasion of privacy to him, analogous to a physical trespassing. Now, the problem with that is if it was a physical trespassing, like assume there's somebody who mistakenly wanders onto my front yard, I'm not going to shoot him. You know, I mean, there's a physical force is a absolute last resort and generally should only be in response to physical force or the threat of physical force, right? I wouldn't want to force myself onto somebody else over a simple misunderstanding. Because that seems kind of, well, wrong, actually, morally wrong to force myself upon somebody, to strike somebody because of a simple misunderstanding where I thought they said something, but they actually didn't, or they did say something, but didn't mean it the way that I thought they did. And there's an apology and it's like, don't worry about it. You know, because stuff happens, silly things happen. So if somebody wandered onto my property and appeared to be lost, or somebody wandered on my property and said, hey, is this? And I just pull out a gun and shoot them. I don't think I would really do that. I don't think I would shoot somebody for being on my property unless there was an obvious threat. Like, say, they themselves are carrying a gun, or they have a whole posse of people carrying boards and baseball bats and lead pipes and such, all the different weapons from the game Clue. Then I would start to get a little bit worried and maybe reach for my gun. But other than that, I'm pretty laid back. Well, not knowing who owned this drone that flew over his backyard, the man in Kentucky, who is again Mr. Meredith, took out his shotgun and fired 3 blasts of number 8 buckshot to take the drone out. Now, was that illegal to fire upon something which is on his own property? Well, it depends on who you ask. Probably not. Was it the right thing to do, though? Well, it depends on who you ask, but I would say probably not. He told Ars Technica that it was just right there and it was hovering. He says, I never would have shot it if it was flying. So when it came down with a video camera right over my back deck, that's not going to work, he says. I know that they're neat little vehicles, but one of those uses shouldn't be flying into people's yards and videotaping. Well, I would agree. You shouldn't fly a drone onto somebody's yard and start taping. That is kind of a little bit shady. you should at the very least ask permission before flying a drone onto somebody else's property, because then you're trespassing. It's kind of like hunting. You wouldn't just go hunting on somebody else's property. That's called poaching. So you wouldn't go poaching for video either by not asking for permission. And chances are too, probably you're going to find somebody who will say yes if you ask if you can just tape some stuff on their property, because people are generally, at least down here in the South, pretty hospitable and would probably invite you in for coffee. Well, minutes later, after he shot down this drone, at least that's what he's accused of doing, a car full of 4 men that he didn't recognize rolled up. He says they were looking for a fight. They then used profanity, asking him if he was the you-know-what that shot his drone. One of them asked, according to Meredith. His terse reply to the men was, while, of course, wearing a 10mm handgun, Glock in this case, holstered on his hip, "If you cross that sidewalk onto my property, there's going to be another shooting." Well, that's a threat of physical force, or at least it's an implied threat, sort of. It's implied violence should a prerequisite be carried out. So if there were to be someone who walked across that sidewalk, then the follow-up would be 3 rounds of 10mm into the chest of the young man who decides to cross the sidewalk. That's at least, at the very least, implied threat of violence, which is, I would say, excessive, but hey, you know, maybe he's had bad experiences in the past. It's understandable. The men then backed down and retreated into their car and waited for the police to arrive. His only comment was that he had hoped that he had a big checkbook because of the drone, which cost $1,800, Meredith added. The Kentuckian was then arrested Sunday evening in Hillview, Kentucky, just south of Louisville, and charged with criminal mischief and wanton endangerment. He was released the following day. The Hillview Police Department did not immediately respond to Ars Technica's request for comment either. So the report of the downed drone comes a month after Ars Technica also reported on a similar incident in Modesto. But in that case, the drone operator was flying his drone over his parents' farm, and it was then shot down by a neighbor. Here, Meredith, who operates a local trucking company, said that he had seen 2 or 3 different drones in his backyard previously over the last year and was disturbed by their presence, saying, "What recourse do we have?" The 43-year-old man claimed that law enforcement officials, including the county jailer, told him privately that they agreed with his actions, and that the people that own the drones and the people that hate guns are the only ones that disagree with what I did, he said. Now, if I had had a .22 rifle, I should have gone to jail for that. The diameter of those things is going to come down with enough force to hurt somebody. Number 8 buckshot, he claims, is not. Number 8 is the size of a pinhead. The bottom line is that it's a right to privacy issue and defending my property issue, saying it would have been no different had he been standing in my backyard. As Americans, we have a right to defend our rights and our property, he adds, which I agree to that statement. As Americans, we do have a right to defend our lives and our property and our rights and everything else that belongs to us. We have a right to defend those things. However, if that man had, say, walked onto his property, would Mr. Meredith have filled him with number 8 buckshot? I kind of doubt it, actually. I don't think Mr. Meredith is a violent man. I kind of don't think that Mr. Meredith is someone who would pull out a gun and shoot somebody just because, or simply because they had walked onto his property. Now, I could be wrong about that, but it seems like, anyway, just judging by what happened here, Mr. Meredith was fed up. I'm not saying his name as Mr. Meredith because I necessarily agree or disagree with what he did, but just as a matter of respect, I refer to almost everybody as Mr. this or that. Just, I'm a Southerner, okay? That's just how it is. I mean, you know how it is in Chattanooga and in our area, everybody's Mr. So-and-so just because that's how it is. Unless you know them well enough, they're always Mr. something. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's just the South. That's just how, that's just how we are here. You know how it is. Well, Mr. Meredith, it appears, is not a inherently violent person who's looking to shoot people just because. He's an American who owns guns just as you could or I do or anyone else, and that's fine. Mr. Meredith can own guns, and he certainly can defend his property. Now, should he be held liable for the destruction of supposedly, anyway, $1,800 of property? Well, we'll have to see. He says, we have a lawyer and there's a court date, and then it's going to be a hearing, Meredith said. It's not going to stop with the 2 charges against me, which I'm confident that will get reduced or get dismissed completely. And what would Mr. Meredith like to tell his errant drone operator when he meets him again? He says, I would just like him to get some education on his toy and learn to respect the rights of the people, he said. It's fine and dandy, and I think it's cool that there's a camera on it, he says, but just take it to a park or something. He's not a responsible drone owner. So Mr. Meredith is obviously not against drones in general. He's not against the ownership or the flying of drones, and he's not even against the idea of there being cameras on them, apparently, because he says that it's cool that there are cameras on them. He simply was worried about his own property. And we'll see how the court case carries out. maybe his charges will get reduced. Maybe he'll be asked to simply pay the $1,800 for the drone. We'll see. But the lesson that should be learned is respect other people's privacy. Respect other people's privacy. And I know you probably do already, but it's worth saying again anyway, because we all have to keep these things in mind. And sometimes we have to be reminded that just because we have something cool, we have a nice new tool, doesn't mean that we can go waving it around and other people's faces or other people's properties or whatever, because it really doesn't work that way. If you're going to be on somebody else's property or in their faces, you should probably respect some sort of retaliation, because not everyone is as laid back as I am, who just doesn't care. Even if you have a right to do something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can expect no recourse due to you having done it. That's just the nature of things, and that's just life, unfortunately. Amazon has beaten Netflix to sign up Top Gear talent for the new motoring show. So in a surprise move, former Top Gear presenters Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond have signed a 3-year deal with Amazon for a new motoring show. Earlier rumors suggested that the trio, who left the program earlier this year when Clarkson was let go as a consequence of, allegedly anyway, punching a producer, would sign a deal with rival streaming service Netflix, which was to be expected because Netflix is, of course, the #1 streaming platform here in the States anyway. Now, while the show is being created for Amazon Prime, which requires a yearly subscription of £79 in the UK and $99 here in the States, it doesn't currently have a name. The company has confirmed that it will go into a production shortly and launch in 2016. If you don't want Amazon Prime's free shipping, you can get Amazon Instant Video with a slightly cheaper monthly subscription, and the show will form part of Amazon Prime's original programming lineup, which currently includes the Steven Spielberg-produced Extant, Ridley Scott's The Man, and Ridley Scott's The Man in the High Castle. And it's nice to see Ridley Scott doing another adaptation of a Philip K. Dick work, because the last Philip K. Dick adaptation that Ridley Scott did was my favorite movie, Blade Runner. One of the best movies of all time, by the way. If you haven't seen Blade Runner, you have to see Blade Runner. You really do, especially if you're into tech, if you're into morality, if you're into the idea of what is human. I mean, we know. I mean, especially Christians, we know what human is. It's a creation of God that's designed for his own glory. We know what a human is. We know the definitions of such. But think about, other than that, like if we genetically modified a person and it was born and it was a male, articulate, everything, is it a human? I would say yes, because even though it's genetically engineered, wasn't born in the womb of a woman and all these sorts of things, it's still human, created in the image of God. But anyway, it creates all sorts of interesting conflicts in the movie Blade Runner. It's such a genius movie. Again, to use the word genius, there's so many great things about Blade Runner that I really can't get into all of them, because that would be a whole hour-long show. Maybe I'll do that someday on the 30th, or I think we're already past that. Maybe on the 35th anniversary of Blade Runner, I will talk about all the intricacies and all the genius bits of Blade Runner. In fact, I think the 35-year anniversary is actually coming up in about 2 years. It's 2015 now. The movie was released in 1981 or 82. So then the 35-year anniversary would be 2017 or 2018. So maybe I'll do a whole show about the genius of Blade Runner, all the intricacies of Blade Runner, and just what a great movie it is in general. By the way, I read a really, really good book today. Or rather, I was rereading parts of it today. It's called Thieves, Emporium by Max Hernandez. It's actually really good. And no, I'm not being paid to say that. It's a very, very good book. And I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's technically accurate. Now, keep in mind, it's not a book for kids. There are some adult sequences in it, not pornographic or anything like that. It's a book for mature adult readers, because it deals with the real world and how real life is. So you have to keep that in mind when reading it. But it's a really fascinating work of fiction, and it's almost a work of nonfiction in certain ways, just based on how accurate it is. So it's sort of half fiction and half not. But the story itself is told in a fictional setting. But it's really just a genius work, because it's dealing with issues of privacy, it's dealing with issues of government, it's dealing with issues of money, it's dealing with all sorts of different issues all at the same time. And it's a fascinating book. And even if you can't afford to buy it, because we're not all rich, it's being serialized on the Daily Bell That's dailybell.com. If you go to their editorial section, you'll find Thieves Emporium. Right now it's on part 3, Twin Banknotes, and it's about a young girl who's not named until she's named Fawn by the Thieves Emporium network, the underground, and she's brought into this interesting society of people who operate outside the confines of the state. And it deals with sort of philosophies of anarchy. It deals with philosophies of money. What is real money anyway? It deals with the Federal Reserve especially. And it's just a really good book. So Thieves Emporium by Max Hernandez. Definitely check that out if you get the chance. I happen to know the producer, or not producer, publisher, I suppose producer as well, of the book. And it's really, it's to talk about it with him is really interesting as well. And it's just a great book. So Thieves Emporium, it's on Amazon. It's being serialized on the Daily Bell right now. It's on part 3. So check that out. And Daily Bell's a good website anyway, so I'd recommend checking it out even so. And again, I'm not being paid to say any of that. I'm saying it just because I really do think that it's actually a very, very good book. So Amazon has beaten Netflix to sign up Top Gear with a series on Amazon. So according to the Wall Street Journal, Amazon won the global rights to the series, meaning that it will appear on Prime Video in the US, the UK, Austria, Germany, and countries without Amazon Prime may still be able to watch the show, with Wall Street Journal noting that Amazon will be able to license the rights to the show to broadcasters or streaming services in other territories. So early episode predictions is, according to one commenter on Ars Technica, the gang trying to deliver parcels with drones as part of their new employer's trial service. And the commenter adds, what could possibly go wrong? Well, lots of things, knowing Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and the other guy. Top Gear is off the air, unfortunately, but it's going to be back on Amazon. So cool. A body camera captured a policeman shooting a motorist in the head, and murder charges are soon to follow. I've seen the video. I've watched the portion that has been released. Supposedly, it's actually a several hour-long video. I've heard in between 15 minutes, 26 minutes, and several hours. So the actual length of the video, I'm not clear on, but only about 3 or so minutes, about 4 have been released on YouTube and on other websites as well. If you're a follower of Free Thought Project or Cop Block, then you're probably, or Punk Rock Libertarians as well on Facebook, then you probably have seen the video or at least screenshots of it. Well, a Cincinnati County prosecutor released body cam footage of a police officer's, what they're calling senseless shooting of a motorist in the head, which is footage that paved the way for the University of Cincinnati police officer's murder indictment on Wednesday. Hamilton County, now again, not Hamilton County in Tennessee, this is Hamilton County over in Ohio. Prosecutor Joe Dieter said that Officer Ray Tensing purposely killed a 43-year-old motorist named Samuel DeBose on July the 19th. The officer, whom the university said had jurisdiction on the streets adjacent to the school, pulled over the motorist because the vehicle he was driving did not have a front license plate. Now, a front license plate is a foreign concept to those of us who are in Tennessee and Georgia and Alabama. We don't have front license plates, but apparently in Ohio, a front license plate is a thing, and you have to have them, which is yet another thing you have to pay for. So here in our area in Chattanooga, I've not seen one single front license plate except on a vehicle that was not from here. As far as I know, in the Tennessee Vehicle Code or whatever, there's no provision for front license plates. So fortunately, we don't have those here. I imagine it's just another method of collecting revenue when it comes right down to it. It's just another way to get more money. You have to have 2 license plates, one on the front, one on the back, and it each costs you like $50 probably. Well, anyway, the prosecutor says, I've been doing this for 30 years. That's what Dieter said to a news conference. And this is the most asinine act I've ever seen a police officer make. Totally unwarranted. The county prosecutor added that Tensing purposely killed him. Now, in the video, and the video is a little bit hard to get the first time. I've watched it a few times now. What happens in the video is actually rather fast-paced when it comes to the actual shooting itself. It happens all very quickly. There's a snap of fingers and it's over, because that's how shootings usually are. Shootings aren't like in the movies where they last minutes at a time. There's a firefight and you get shot and you're just wounded, and you fire at somebody else and they get hit in the arm and it's okay because somehow you haven't hit the brachial artery and all sorts of other things. It's not like that in real life. In a real shooting situation, it can last anywhere from 10 seconds to 30 seconds to sometimes a minute. An actual real shooting situation takes no time at all. It's usually over in less than a minute. In fact, most shootings only take place within about 10 seconds, even with exchanges of fire, because guns are fast things. Gunfights are very fast things. So there's not much time to think. Now, does that justify the actions of the police officer? Well, Probably not. We'll have to see what the court case says. Of course, he is only an alleged murderer. He's an accused murderer. He's a defendant in this case. I should say he's a murder defendant in this particular case, this officer in Cincinnati. So is he guilty? We don't know yet. The court case has not been determined. The jury has not proclaimed that as of yet. So we're not sure if he's guilty. He's only a defendant in this particular case. That's something that has to be kept in mind. He is innocent until proven guilty. That applies to both the media and to legal institutions. So no matter what my personal inclinations may be when it comes to the police, when it comes to uses of force, in a court case, he is innocent until proven guilty. He is a mere defendant in this case. That's something that has to be kept in mind and something that must be made clear. No matter what my personal feelings may be in the media, he is innocent until proven guilty. Now, the video is very interesting to watch. It's morbid. It's terrible. It's awful what happens, but it's interesting to watch. If you sort of have that disconnect of feeling, you can watch it and say, what an interesting scenario. So what happens is, at least from what we can ascertain from watching the video, because, stuff happens that's not on video, you're not clear on exactly what the exchange was, what have you. It appears that Mr. DuBose, who's the gentleman in the car, who's the victim in this case, is a little bit apprehensive about giving his license to the police officer. He then later in the video admits that he doesn't actually have his license on him, although he does have a license and it's never been suspended. But he does reach in his glove box around to look for his license, and really not much in terms of violence occurs. Well, then the car appears to move slightly. Maybe he took his foot off the brake pedal because he didn't have it in park. It was an accident. We don't know. We don't know the exact scenario that occurred there. Even though it is on video, it's not exactly clear what happens in this very short span of time, less than 10 seconds. What happens then is the police officer attempts to reach in the car, which gets a shocked reaction from Mr. DuBose. And then the police officer tries to open the door. Mr. DuBose tries to hold it shut. That's what appears to occur in the video. Then the car appears to move slightly anyway. It's unclear in the video. And the police officer shoots his handgun into the car, hitting Mr. DuBose in the head, presumably killing him instantly. And the police officer falls over backwards, and the car rolls away because now there's no control over it. And he starts screaming into his radio, shots fired, and all that. And other police officers arrive. They clear the scene. The gun is still pointed in the car. It appears that only one shot was fired, and it was fired by the police officer. And it's all on video, his body camera. So the filmed incident in which this officer kills Mr. DuBose is passing around the internet all over the place. The county prosecutor released the footage Wednesday following calls by DuBose's family to do so. The Associated Press had sued to get the short film as well, but the prosecutor released it ahead of any court ruling about it. The university police said that the officer pulled over the motorist after following him briefly just south of campus. According to the tape, the officer asks for the motorist's driver's license and instead is handed a small bottle of alcohol after a brief back and forth between the two. Suddenly, the officer yells, "Stop," and shoots him in the head after the motorist begins making what they say is a getaway in the car, according to the tape. Now, the policeman does point out the bottle that's on the floor of this car and asks him to hand it to him, and he does, and it does appear to be sealed, so there's no open container in this particular case. A university officer who got to the scene immediately after the shooting wrote in his report that Tensing said that he was being dragged by the vehicle and had to fire his weapon. Another officer said that he had witnessed Tensing being dragged, but Dieters, the county prosecutor, told the news conference that Tensing's account of the incident was entirely fabricated, saying he fell backwards after he shot, Dieter says. The officer who surrendered on Wednesday faces a maximum life term if he's convicted. Stuart Matthews.
This is a mob mode. This is a mob mode.